Welcome to CIS195 Week 8. This week we will be discussing HTML forms. An HTML form is a device that allows you to gather information from your web page and then send that information to a server for processing. I'm going to be taking us through the process of building a form and several different form controls. Here are the types of form controls that we're going to be going over. The first one is the input field. So an input field is an area where you can type in data. For instance, this one that has the word text next to it and the one that has the word password next to it. A label is an area that describes the information that you're to place into the input field. A field set is used to place a box around a group of fields like we have here under text and password. A selection control allows you to select an option from a group of options. For instance, here where we have country, we can choose an appropriate option. A text field is a larger input box that allows you to input a large amount of text. Buttons such as the submit and reset allow you to control the form. The reset in this case would take away all the information that's currently in the form, and submit would send it back to the server for processing. There can also be things known as hidden fields that send information back to the server that the user does not have to put in. So for this week we're going to be using this pre-created form index.html along with this script file. We'll use that as part of our submission process. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started. So the form itself needs to be within a form element. I've already got that started here. So it's just a form tag and an ending form tag. I've placed some comments in here to allow us to know what we're going to be placing inside of our form. So we're going to start off with an input form, an input field. Now we can put this in here using the tag input, and then we have to give it a type. So we're telling it what type of input are we going to be placing within this field. In this case, this is going to be just some text input that we're going to be typing in here. Next piece of information that's important is the ID. We've used this before in other controls within HTML. This allows us to identify this field if we want to place some CSS on it. So I'm just going to call this ID text. Also going to give this a name. The name is important because this tells the server what the information is that it's receiving. I'm going to make this similar to our ID, but I'm going to name it a little differently just so we can identify it appropriately. I'll call it name underscore text. I'll then close up the tag here. I'm also going to put some line breaks in here so that we don't have our form controls all pushed up against one another. Okay. I've also opened this page already in a web page so that we can see what's happening as I complete the input. So let me go ahead and refresh this page. And there we have our first input field. I can click in here and I can actually type into it so we know things are working. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to add on to this is a label. So we're going to place the label above this. So let's just add above our input block. And we'll put a label. I have to add an attribute, and I have to add the attribute. It's FOR. So what FOR indicates, it's telling us what field on our form is this label connected to. In this case, it's going to be connected to the ID text. So remember the ID that we placed here? We're going to say that the label is connected to that. I'll close off that label and then give it our label that's going to display on the form. And let me refresh this. Now the point of placing this attribute, the for attribute here, is to allow us to be able to click on the label itself, and then this will select the form for us. This can be really helpful with special devices, maybe like a screen reader or just a mobile device where it's harder to actually click onto the control itself. Yeah, let's go ahead and do our next type of form, field. I'm just going to copy the information we placed here before and paste it because most of it is going to be the same. So we'll go to the input type, and this will be password. Here, I'll change this to ID, password, and name, password. Adjust our label information to connect this, and then connect what's displayed. So this will be a password. And let me refresh this. So now we have our new field. If I click on the label, it should click in here. Now password is a little different because if I type, nothing displays, but the information is actually being held in this name here within the browser. Alright, let's do another type of input. Let's do the email input. As you probably guessed, the type here is going to be email. I'll change the ID information. Yes, this does take a bit of effort, but it's worth it in the long run. Alright, so let me refresh. Now we have our email available to us. URL, very similar. Change that to a URL. And URL. And then we're going to add in a telephone number input. Here things are going to get a little more interesting for us. Alright, so this will be type TEL, short for telephone. And we'll put telephone. Shorten it a little here, let's make it phone number. Alright. So now we've got all of our different forms. Each one of these is selectable as we want them to be. Alright, so for the telephone number, I'm going to add something. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to add in our buttons next because I want to be able to show you what happens when we try to submit the form. Alright, so for the buttons, if we go to the submit, our tag is button. We have to tell it what type of button. So in this case, our type is going to be a submit button. Close that tag. Tell it what I want to display. I want to display submit, and I'm also going to be putting another button on here. We're going to be putting a reset button. So let me refresh this. So now we have some input boxes and our buttons to control the form. Oops, see, I made a mistake here. I should have said the word reset there. So it puts the appropriate name on the button. Alright, so at this point, if I were to type some information in here, and I press the reset button, it does what it's supposed to do. It resets it. If I put some information here and I push submit, it doesn't do anything except that. That's interesting. So under URL, it actually understands that this should be a URL, so it's missing some important information. So obviously it's missing probably the .com. So let me resubmit that. Oh, it's not enjoying that URL, unfortunately. So I am typing in the URL, and the form itself doesn't enjoy that. Oh, I recall now. This actually has to be HTTP in order for it to work. So a URL field is not necessarily the best that we want to use here, but it does kind of give us an idea about something called pattern matching. Forms as a default, certain fields will want to match a particular pattern before they'll allow you to submit the form. And we'll be talking about that here with the phone number. Let's continue here with our submit button, because I want to be able to show you what happens with this information if it's sent back to the server. As part of our default files that I had you download, there's one called this form script JavaScript. This is not something that you need to understand how it works, but what this is going to do is it's going to take our information and it's going to pop up another browser window showing the information that we've entered. So in order to use this, we're going to need to add some additional information to our page. One of these is in the form itself. I have to give it an ID field, and I have to give it the ID all fields form. It has to be that because this JavaScript is looking for that name as part of its coding. We're also going to add a new tag up here in our head called script. We'll give it a source equals, and then the name of our script, which is form script.js. Okay, so what's happening here is when I press the submit button, that submit button is going to call this script here, which should, if everything works right, display the information that we've entered into our form on a new web page. So let's go ahead and do that. Yeah, it didn't work. Let's give this another shot. Okay, looking back through my notes, I realized what I did. So in our script tag here, I need to add one more attribute here. And this attribute is called defer. And what this does is it just ensures that everything on the page is ready before the JavaScript runs. So let's go ahead and do this again. Now I've placed some text already in here. So if I press the submit button now, you'll notice that a new web page opens. It has those names that we've placed here, and it has the data that I've typed in as well. So let me go ahead and close that. And I just saw there that I believe I typed something incorrectly in here. Maybe not. Okay, everything's looking good. Let's go back to our telephone field here, and we're going to add some more attributes into this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into our input field here, and I'm actually going to press enter because I want to have a little more space for us to type and to make it easier for you guys to see what's going on. I'm going to add another item here. I'm going to add the required attribute. So if I add the required attribute here, and I refresh this, and I press the submit button here, you'll notice that it tells me I need to fill out this field. So it's not going to even allow me to submit this unless this field is filled out. So if I did put something in there, I could submit it. Alright. Next thing we're going to add in here is called a placeholder. So a placeholder gives you the opportunity to tell the person using your form what type of information you want in here. So I'm going to type in an example 23-456-7890. Let me refresh my page. So now in our field it actually has this kind of a light version of what we want them to type. Now, but you will notice here, I don't actually have to type that. I can put whatever I want in here and submit it at this point. So things aren't perfect yet. So I can actually make some adjustments here to make it harder for the person to enter the wrong information. So let me go ahead and I'm going to press another enter here, and we're going to actually add something called a pattern. So a pattern is very similar to what we saw in the URL. It tells the form to only accept input that meets a certain pattern. Now in this particular case, this pattern is going to be a little bit confusing to you because it is known as what's called as a regular expression. This is not something that you need to know for this course. Later down the road, if you continue in the computer science courses, you will run across regular expressions deeper than this. But what I'm going to do here is I'm actually just going to type in the regular expression and then I'll discuss it afterwards. Actually, I'm just going to paste it in because it'll be a little quicker. Okay, so I have this regular expression. Here, get all this extra junk off of here. Okay, so now if I try to, let me refresh my page again, if I just try to put something random in there, it's not going to allow me to do that. It's going to say, please match the requested format. So in this particular case, I'm going to have to actually make it look like a phone number before it'll allow me to submit it. Now, if I look at this pattern, just walk through it real quickly here. This little caret symbol here at the beginning says, this is where things start. Nothing else comes before this. The slash and the D indicates a digit. This portion behind it, the 3, indicates there'll be 3 digits. The dash indicates there'll be a dash. So it's 3 digits, a dash. 3 digits, a dash, 4 digits. The $sign means this is it. This is the end. Nothing comes after this. So the only thing this pattern is going to accept is that look. 3 digits, a dash, 3 digits, a dash, 4 digits. If I try to add one more digit onto there, it should not allow us to do that. Alright, so that's it. That's just kind of a brush over the top of what a regular expression is. You can use this in many other places to make it so that people enter data that's clean before it actually goes back into a database. Alright, let's move on to our number input. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab one of our previous entries here. So this is very similar. This is going to be a number. I'm just going to replace the areas that need to be changed. This will be a type number. And we'll give it a name number. Alright, we refresh our page. So we have our new form field here. It's got these little up and down arrows on the side. Makes it kind of neat so that I can just choose my numbers that way. Or I could just type in a number if I wanted to. One of the interesting things about the number field is it allows a few more options here. Let me just press the enter. One of those is called min, which would mean a minimum value that we want to allow. Let's just make that a 1, and we can actually do a maximum value. Let's just make that a 10. Refresh our page. Now if I try to do anything larger than a 10, it should stop me. And it should not let me go under a 1, which it did. Okay, let's move on to the date. So let's grab this up here. And we'll make this a date field. Date and date. Alright, let's refresh that. So the date field, you can actually type in the date or choose the date picker and pick a date for you. Next type is a checkbox. So this just allows us to make a check against the item that we want. So in this case, we're just going to have a simple checkbox, and we're going to make this type checkbox. I think I'm just going to copy that and make my life just a little easier. And we'll put checkbox in the appropriate locations. And this one's not going to be called checkbox, we'll just call this subscribe. Refresh our page. So if I click on subscribe, as it should, it turns on and off the checkbox. Radio buttons are somewhat similar to checkboxes, except they allow you to choose one of a group of items, similar to the drop-down, which we'll be getting to next. Let's just go ahead and I'm going to copy our radio button, or copy here so we can start our radio buttons here. So on this particular item, we're going to have a different type of label. We're not actually going to have this connected to our radio buttons because it does not make sense in this particular case. I'm going to make this label, it's called right or left-handed, to allow people to make a choice on if they're right or left-handed. The input type in this case is going to be radio. We'll give it an ID. So this first the first radio button is going to be for our right hand. So we'll call this ID right. And we're going to give it a name. It's going to be a little different than the names we've been putting here before. I'm actually going to be called this hand to indicate that this is for a hand. I'm going to take out these because I'm actually going to be putting this information side by side. We're going to create another label here. And this label actually is where we're going to be putting the connection back to that input label. This is where we're going to be putting the for equals. Put your ID right. And then we'll type here right-handed. Since we go ahead and I'm going to refresh this, kind of show you what we've got going here. So we've got the initial label that just indicates what it is we want this area to be referencing. We have the button, the radio button here, and then we have the label indicating what the radio button is. Let's go back over here, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to copy these last two lines, re-enter these, except this is going to be for the left hand. The name will stay the same. We'll come back over here to D right, and we'll make this left, and we'll make this left-handed. So if I refresh our page, we should have an area that indicates are you right or left-handed, and then you can choose one or the other buttons. You notice how choosing one causes the other one to turn off. Now this is due to this name attribute. These radio buttons are both bound to this single name. Thus, when I choose one or the other, it will only allow one of those to be associated with this name. I could put more radio buttons if I chose to as well, but only one of them would be turned on. Also, here I need to clean some stuff up here, so let me put my line breaks back in here, refresh this, and now we got everything back to the way we should have it. Okay, we're going to move into the more complex of our items, and this is our drop-down field. So for the drop-down field, we'll go ahead and we'll start it off just like we have for our others. Oops, let's see, what did I do there? Oh, I didn't copy things right. Let me redo that. Let me find one that's not going to have a lot of odd stuff in it. There we go. Okay. So this will be called, we're just going to be called this drop down, and then this will be, we're going to be choosing a country in this. And in this particular case, we're not going to be using input. We're actually going to be using a different type. This is known as a select option here. We don't actually give it a type because select is telling the form that this is going to be a drop-down select list. So we can take off the type. Let's delete that. We'll give it an ID. We'll give this the ID drop-down. And we'll give it the name. We could say drop down, but because this is a country, I'm just going to use country because it'll make more sense when this is sent back to the server. Let's get rid of our line breaks at this point. This will come later. Okay, so under the select tag, now we need to place the different options that can be used within the box. So this, we use a tag called option. We then give it a value equals, in this case we'll make this to be USA, close up the tag, and then we have to say what do we want to display when this is shown, and I'll close up the option. Now I'm just going to close up this select at the moment because I want you to see what is going to show on our page. And then we need our line breaks. Okay, come back over here. So now we have our drop-down selector. There's only one selection available at this moment because we've only created one option. So let's go ahead and create some more options here. I'm going to create a total of 4 different options. The second one's going to be Canada. Next is going to be UK and Australia. Refresh our page, and now I should be able to choose any of those 4 in our drop down. Okay, within our option, within our drop down, within our options within our drop down, we can actually group these. So that's what we're going to do, is we're going to take these top 2 groups and we're going to group them together. So we're going to use what's known as an opt group. So an opt group allows us to take a certain number of these, place a label. So we're going to say label here. We're going to call this North America. So what this will do is it'll put an unselectable option within our list, but then it will group whichever of these we want. In this case, this option and this option within our option group. So I have an option group, 2 options, and then 2 other options not in the group. So let's go ahead and look, see what that looks like. So if I choose the drop down, now I have this option, the top, called North America, but it's not selectable. It just groups these 2 items and then the separate ones below. Okay, our next one is our text area. This is going to be very similar to what we've done before, so let me go ahead and grab one of those up here. So in this case, we put the label, we'll give it a name. In this case, I'm just going to be calling this one text area for the name, and we'll just say this is a message. So down here where it says input, this is not what we're going to be using. It's very similar to the drop-down select. It's a different type. And this is called type text area. We don't have to give it a type. We do have to give it an ID, so we'll give this an ID. We'll just call it text area. We'll give it a name that's passed back to the server. I'm just going to call this one message back to the server. Okay, so let's go ahead and close that up. We'll show this here. Oh, I made an error. I did not properly close up the text area here. There's actually a finishing tag that I'm supposed to do for this. It's a little different. So let's refresh that. There we go. So now we have a message area here. Now in this particular case, you'll notice that the message area is fairly small. We may want this to be larger. Now you may know that within a web page you can actually grab and drag these text areas and make them larger yourself, but you could have made this larger initially by adding some additional attributes to this. So I'm going to go back to the text area, and after the word name I'm going to type rows equals. I'm going to say I want to have at least 4 rows, and I want to have at least a column size of 50 characters. So let me submit that. Refresh that page. There we go. So now the input area is sizably larger to allow more input. Okay, we're going to add one more item to this. So let me go ahead and enter this. We're going to add something called an access key. An access key allows you to press the Alt and a key on your keyboard, and you can move directly to that field on your form. I'm going to make this an M, so that if I refresh this and I press the Alt and then the M, it'll go directly to that field to allow me to input this. Okay, our last form item. This is going to be a hidden input. So I'm just going to actually just type this all in myself. So this will be an input, similar to what we've had before. This will be of type equals hidden. We'll give it an ID equals ID hidden. And we'll give it a name equals ID, equals quote name hidden field. And now the next thing we do after this, we're actually going to use the word value here. I'll just press enter. Value, we're going to actually give it a value, and I'm just going to say this is a hidden value. We go ahead and close up our input field here. Now if we refresh the page, you won't see anything. And the reason you don't see anything is because this is not showing. It's meant to be hidden. Let me go ahead and I'm just going to type some information in here in a few different fields. Not going to go in all of them. I'm left-handed. This is a message. Go ahead and hit our submit button. Oh, it's not going to let me. That's right. That's required. Submit this. So now in our form submission, you'll notice those different pieces of information. The text came through. The password came through. The hidden field came through. So all of our form controls are working correctly. All right, one last item, the field set. So let's go back up, and I'm just going to add around our text input area and our password. I'm going to group those together. So let me just add this above. So we're going to put the word field set around that. And then I'll go after the password. We'll close up the field set. Now if I refresh my page, that didn't do what I wanted to. Oh, that's why there's an extra field set over here. There we did. So now it puts a block around these, separating them from the rest of the information on the page. We can also add within the field set, there's an option called a legend that allows you to put a bit of information within the set. I'm just going to say a group of fields. Refresh our page, so that actually places it within the field set group itself. All right, that's it for this week.